thing my mom always said was I could get knocked down over and over, but I always got up and got further than I was before. And I felt like I let her down because I didn't think I could do it again.
You're listening to the latest dose of Bipolar Recorder. This podcast may cause dizziness and blurred vision. Enjoy.
Welcome to Bipolar Recorder. My name is Hunter Keegan. Thanks for joining me today. As I continue to recover and slowly stabilize from the major depressive episode I experienced over the autumn months, I've kept going back through the interviews I recorded in early November, and I've been editing them for release. This installment to Bipolar Recorder was originally recorded on November 5th, which was about 2 weeks before my major depressive episode escalated to a crisis situation. During this recording, I talk a lot about how dicey addiction, recovery, and maintaining stability is. I also talk about wanting to take a break from all narcotic substances. I mention this because, as with some other installments from this most recent series, as I was editing the audio, I kept noticing that there are times in this recording where I discuss being in the throes of mood cycles, medication changes, and other disruptions. If you pay attention, you can hear as these factors arise throughout the discussion. It's pretty eerie to me. But enough about that. The guest for this installment was a woman named Brittany, who I'd met through Twitter Spaces. As you may recall, Twitter Spaces are public audio chat rooms. I used to be very active in the mental health Twitter space community up until a couple of months ago. Occasionally, I still host Twitter Spaces. It's been a great way to meet people who want to come on the show. I really love this installment because Brittany is so articulate and such a good storyteller. Her trials with bipolar disorder over the last couple of years alone are haunting and incredible to listen to. Brittany talks extensively about an inpatient hospitalization experience that she endured about a year ago. I do have an important content warning for today's installment. This one goes into a very detailed conversation about suicidal ideation and even a suicide attempt. It also mentions self-harm a couple of times. Brittany discusses these topics in a very personal but tactful manner. Still, the subject matter is obviously very dark. Listener discretion is advised. It was an important conversation to have, and I know you'll find it as incredible as I did. Let's go ahead and listen to Brittany and her story. Today, I am joined by Brittany, who is a woman from Houston, Texas, living with mental illness, and she's been so kind to take some time today to speak with me about her life and experiences. So, Brittany, let me pass it over to you and start by asking, what is your formal diagnosis, or do you perhaps live with multiple diagnoses?
So, about 4 years ago, I was officially diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2.
Okay.
Generalized anxiety disorder, and insomnia. I had been diagnosed just major depressive disorder when I was 19 or 20. And then earlier this year, I had a psychiatrist diagnose me with borderline personality disorder as well.
Wow. Okay.
So that's kind of like a controversial, whether I have it or not. I saw another side that's like, I don't want to put that in your formal diagnosis. I'd rather get to know you before I say, yes, you have this. So
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
mixed bag.
And of course, for our audience who may not know, borderline personality disorder often gets confused with bipolar disorder because they both involve very sudden mood shifts. Of course, with bipolar disorder, those mood shifts are much more prolonged. Now, you
Right.
said you were diagnosed with major depression when you were about 19 or 20. How old are you now? How long have you been living with these types of conditions for?
I am 36 now, and it was a big deal getting diagnosed in the first place. Mental health was not something talked about in our household. It was pretty taboo. When I
Hmm.
was, I think I was 9 years old, my mom attempted suicide, and she spent time in a mental facility
Hmm.
for a couple of weeks. So it was kind of one of those brush it under the rug and we don't really talk about it kind of things. So I had asked my mom, I feel like I need to talk to somebody when I was a little bit older in my late teens and out of the house. And, she asked me why, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like I need someone to talk to. Like, I don't feel okay all of the time.
Yeah.
Um, and it was never really met with open arms.
Yeah.
And then I had got married um, when I was 21, and um, I had told my husband at the time, I'm not okay. He was against medications at all costs, and
Okay.
I finally told him, I'm not okay, and what we're doing is not working. I'm going to get on medications.
Hmm.
Um, and that made a huge difference. Now, granted, at this time, I'm diagnosed uh, depressive disorder.
Hmm.
We don't know that I'm bipolar.
Right.
So they prescribe me antidepressants.
Of course.
And so what I'm thinking is medication working really well
Hmm.
is actually medication sending me into hypomania.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was on that for about a year before I lost insurance. And then I
Mhm.
went from 22 to 32. So I went 10 years without medication or
Wow.
treatment of any kind.
Wow. That's really interesting. So that's as I was listening to you explain that, I had so many different reactions. One of the first reactions I had was that with your mother's history of mental illness, it's so strange how in some families, because my family is the same way, we don't really talk about stuff. My family is
Yeah.
very dysfunctional. We've gone through some really intense shit. And a lot of that has
Yeah.
been because of me, and
Yeah.
my bipolar disorder. And we never really talk about, oh, we called the police on you that time
Yeah.
because you were so crazy, or we never have those types of deeper conversations. So that was something that resonated with me a lot. Another thing that I was thinking about is, for the audience, we should just mention that often, and as we always say, we're not doctors, but
Right.
it is known that antidepressants can be a trigger for mania for some people with bipolar disorder type 1 or bipolar disorder type 2. And it sounds like you had just that classic experience of, oh man, this is really working
Yeah.
well. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're, so when did you realize that the antidepressant had actually sent you into hypomania?
Well, I didn't really even realize it until I was diagnosed
Yeah.
with bipolar disorder. And I talked to my psychiatrist about it. And because when I was prescribed the antidepressants, it was by a family doctor, it was just a regular primary care physician. When I got diagnosed by a psychiatrist, and she's telling me these pills that I need to be on with mood stabilizers because
Hmm.
antidepressants alone can cause mania. And so knowing that and kind of looking back, I'm like, oh, so
Yeah.
that's what happened. They weren't just working really well.
Hmm.
And so it's like, really looking back on events and times and phases in my life. And when I just thought, I was partying too hard, or,
Yeah.
recently divorced, and I'm living life now. This is what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah.
No, those weren't normal reactions, to the
Mhm.
extent that I was living them.
What kind of partying were you up to?
A lot of drinking, promiscuity,
Yeah.
spending a lot, typical
Yeah.
manic behavior.
Yeah, for sure. I know. So, I am a recovering alcoholic, and I'm coming up right on, God willing, 7 years of alcohol sobriety. But
Congrats.
thank you. But the reason I mentioned that is because back when I was actively drinking and undiagnosed and not
Hmm.
on medication or any treatment, I was in the same headspace as you, where I was like, rocking out,
Yeah.
like, yeah, like party, gonna do it, like I'm killing it. And
Yeah.
that's
And you
not
feel like you are because you're on top of the world.
yeah, you're flying high. You're like, what are all these other dumb motherfuckers
Yeah.
doing? We're just fucking having a good time over
Stop being
here.
a Debbie Downer.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So after that all comes crashing and burning down,
Yeah.
you have kind of some wake up calls. So do you still use anything like that, or
No, I
have
don't.
you
I'm
had
not,
to?
because I have found that I have an addictive personality,
Yeah.
whether it's with substances or people, games, etc. I get addicted to things.
Hmm.
I was addicted to pain medication for a while because I had it. It was there. I didn't need it, but I
Yeah.
had access to it.
Yep.
So nonstop, nonstop. Drinking, it's a very fine line. My mom passed away last November, and I went on a 2-month bender, and I was finally like, one of my friends like, "You're not okay.
Yep.
You know, this is not you."
Hmm.
And where I'm thinking I'm fine, I can handle it. It's okay. It's a part of the grieving process. For me, though, and my tendencies and my personality, it's a fine line to walk. So I try to stay away from everything.
What was your reaction when your friend told you, hey, like, I think something's going on?
Well, at first, because she started it right when I started drinking, she's like,
Like,
Brit,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I was like, no, I'm fine. It's okay. It's not a lot. Well, but at the time I was working from home, and it became when I got off of work to when I was cooking lunch, I'd pour me a
Hmm.
drink. When I got
Hmm.
off work, I'd pour another drink,
Hmm.
and it was really that wake up call of, okay, you're right. You're coming from a good place. At first, it was like, dude, I'm fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just let me grieve.
Yeah.
But then it became more than just grieving.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really intense. And I know personally, when I have a friend, I'm so blessed to just have such a supportive friend group right now who really
Yeah.
knows me well and is really respectful and cognizant of the sort of shit that I live with. And
Yes.
I'm just so fortunate in that way. So when one of my friends reaches out to me and they can tell something's up and they let me know about it, it throws me off.
Right.
It makes me check myself. I'm like, whoa, okay, like
Yeah.
it's time to start reevaluating and taking some steps back. Although I no longer use alcohol, I do occasionally use other substances,
Right. Yeah.
and it's like there is that fine line to walk. And I think for people like yourself, for people like myself who have addictive personalities, it's dicey, you
Yeah.
know. Right now, where I'm at in my headspace is that I think I'm going to start taking a break from everything, including marijuana, soon.
Are you
But
ready for that?
yeah, I am. Marijuana, I can always take it or leave it. I like it a lot, but it's never something I've ever had any sort of like physical or psychological dependency on. So I'll go through phases where I'll smoke weed almost every day for like 9 months. And then
Yeah.
I'll just be like,
Yeah.
okay,
I'm good.
yeah, I was like, it's time to take a break. I'll come back to this whenever.
So that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm not gonna just keep talking about myself,
You are perfectly fine.
just one thing I'll mention briefly because I think it's relevant is that I'm actually on the tail end of a depressive episode.
Yeah, I saw
Uh,
you were having a hard time sleeping and not sleeping much.
yeah, I was sleeping like on average 2 hours a night for about a week and a half, and
Yeah.
it was really messed up. And now I met with my doctor actually, and he adjusted my prescriptions and he put me on some really heavy sleep meds just temporarily. And I've finally gotten like a good 8 hours of sleep for the last 3 nights in a row.
And that
Now
first,
I'm
yeah, that first sleep after not having it for so long is like, oh God, I can breathe.
Yeah, I woke up and I was like, I'm stoked. I was like,
Yeah.
I can't wait to get out of bed. And now I've kind of been thinking to myself over the last couple of days, it's like, now it's time to keep an eye on any hypomanic symptoms
Hmm.
because that sometimes I do swing like that.
So
So,
now, do you have any telltales when you're going into mania or
yeah,
hypomania? What are
yeah,
some of your tells?
it's a great question. So it's different for everyone, right? But for me, the number one thing is lack of sleep. If it's depression or if it's mania, I have really significant sleep disruptions. Now, of course, when I'm manic, the sleep disruptions are because I'm awake all the
Yeah.
time and like doing shit or abusing narcotics. I haven't had a full manic episode since 2015. But during that time period where I had like a just full blown manic episode that lasted about 3 months or so,
Yeah.
and it had psychotic features and it was just craziness.
Your cross country trip.
Yeah, the road trip, the whole odyssey with that. But during that time period, I was not sleeping, I was not eating, I was abusing prescription medication, I was drinking way, way too much. And so substance abuse is another key indicator for me.
Hmm.
If I'm feeling really strong drug or alcohol cravings, that's a big warning sign. Um, Another thing would be, and this is a tricky one because it can come across as being very positive, but I get very sociable with,
Right.
yeah. So I was actually at work yesterday at my lovely day job, and I was like in such a great mood, and I was in like an unusually great mood, and I was talking to some of my coworkers, and I was like, I'm just radiating
Yeah.
positivity. But it was fine. It wasn't inappropriate or anything, but it was just one of those things where I was kind of like, is this how I would normally be behaving? This seems just a little bit unlike my normal personality. So these
And
are,
that's hard, like, is it a good
yeah,
day? Is it mania? Is
yeah,
it a
yeah.
good day?
I'm like, is this just how normal people feel?
Right.
Like that's awesome if that's the case. So yeah, anyway, right now, just kind of keeping tabs on any hypomanic or manic symptoms. And it's been an interesting last couple of weeks for me.
I can imagine.
But anyhow, let's take it back to you. I had some follow-up questions for you. Right before we started, we were just kind of checking in with each other, and you mentioned that you had had a inpatient hospitalization earlier this year.
I
And
did.
I was wondering if you would like to talk to us a little bit about that, maybe share what led up to it, and just anything you're comfortable with talking about related to that experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I spent 3 days in the emergency room in the hospital. I got admitted into the emergency room and then spent 3 days in the hospital. And then I spent another 2.5 days in an outpatient facility getting stabilized on medications. Um, it was the end of March. Earlier in February, I had switched jobs. And so I lost my insurance. And the
Mm.
mood stabilizer I was on at the time, Latuda, um, for anyone who is not aware, is a really expensive drug without insurance. It was $1,200 a prescription. obviously I can't afford that. That was more than my rent at the time.
Mhm.
And so I was only on I had two antidepressants at the time. My mood stabilizer, which I was not on, my sleep meds and my anxiety meds. And so after about 2 weeks of not being on the mood stabilizer, I started rapid cycling and mixed cycles. So for anyone who's not aware, that's rapidly going between depressive episodes and hypomanic episodes and or mixed features. And it
Yeah.
was terrible, just terrible.
Mhm.
So I'm dealing with my mom had passed away in November. My partner and I had recently broke up, and now this. And it was
Mhm.
all kind of culminating at the same time. And I had started telling my friends and my sisters, I can't do this anymore. I need to get off my meds. And it's when I'm in a level mindset, when I'm at baseline, I can give good advice. I know the things you don't do. I know you don't get off of your meds without doctor orders and doctor supervision, right? But when you're in this state of just chaos, emotional chaos, I was like, I can't do it anymore. I need to get off of them. I'm going to stop them. It was a mix. Some friends are like, if that's what you need to do, do it. And then I have some friends saying, that's not smart. You don't need to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me ask you though, was it due to like side effects or did you just think they weren't helping anymore? What was like the driving factor?
well, with not having my mood stabilizer and going through the mixed features and rapid cycling, I was like,
I
I would rather not be
see.
on anything.
And you didn't want any antidepressants in the mix to like potentiate things.
Right. I was like, I don't want to be on anything. I would just rather get off of it until I can see a psychiatrist,
Right.
which is, backwards. But,
It's but did you have access to a psychiatrist at
I did
that
not
time?
at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how would you have known? You're not a doctor. You
Right.
sometimes all we can do is like have the resources in the toolkit that we immediately have available, and you have to make like judgment calls.
Yeah.
And it is not easy and it can be very dangerous. And it's not your fault. It's that are extreme limitations on the resources that are available to Americans with serious mental illness, such as being able to routinely check in with a
Yeah.
psychiatrist or a therapist. If you lose your insurance, that,
Yeah.
you're basically fucked.
Hmm.
So I,
Well, and my job had a good waiting period as first of the month following 30 days. But
mhm.
the kicker is I started in February, and February only had 28 days.
Oh no.
So I had to go an extra month before I got that insurance. And so it was not one of the things that I paid attention to between switching jobs,
Yeah.
which I should have. And it was just the way that things fell. And, when you're in that state, and I think it's part of the stigma that comes with one, mental illness, and two, asking for help. I knew I needed help. I knew
Mhm.
I was not okay. I didn't know how to say it.
Yeah.
I could tell my family, I could tell my friends, I'm not okay, but I didn't know how to say I need help because I didn't know the help that I needed. I just knew that I was not okay.
Yeah.
And so I was really struggling I have struggled with in the past, with self-harm.
Okay.
So that was something that I was really struggling with at the time, the urge to self-harm, and just not wanting to exist.
Mhm.
And I told my sisters, there is a point that I was like, hey guys, I just want to let y'all know I'm not okay. Like I
Yeah.
Googled what it would take if I took all my meds. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And my oldest sister was like, I can come down next week. Uh, promise me you won't do anything without calling me first. And I said,
Wow.
okay. Well, a few days later, I got triggered. I had a
Okay.
depressive trigger. I was in the health insurance field. I took my health insurance license. I found out I couldn't get my license. And I was just that was kind of the thing that just blew everything I had been holding inside open.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like, what am I going to do now? I'm going to have to look for another job. I don't have the money to look for another job to sustain myself between. And, all of these things, I've lost
Yeah.
everything. I've lost my job, in my mind, I hadn't yet, but that was a contingent of my job was getting a license. I'm like, I lost my job. I lost my partner. I lost my mom. Like, what's left,
Yeah.
like I have my kids, but even then I was like, I feel like I'm failing them, I have failed them miserably.
Oh.
And on my way home from work that day, it's a 25-30 minute drive home. I spent
Mm-hmm.
that entire time in my head telling everybody I knew and loved goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew before I got home, I didn't want to wake up the next day.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really hard. Sorry.
No, no, it's okay.
um, to accept,
Yeah.
that I'm done. Like I have felt done so many times before, but one thing my mom always said was I could get knocked down over and over, but I always got up and got further than I was before. And I felt like I let her down because I didn't think I could do it again. Before she passed away, I promised her I would be okay. I have this amazing partner. I have a great support system. I was like, I'm going to be okay. I promise you, it's okay. And I was so very not okay in that moment that I felt like I had just failed her completely.
Mhm.
And I got home and I started taking some of my medications. I was on Ambien at the time.
Okay.
I took several Ambien, and the next day was I don't remember much of it.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up and I texted my job and I told them I was not feeling okay. I couldn't come in. Um, Throughout the course of the day, I took an entire prescription worth of Ambien.
Mm-hmm.
I took several of my Wellbutrin. Any pills that I had, I was taking. Um, I was sending messages to friends. I had sat in the bathtub the night before and I wrote my kids this long explanatory letter, an apology, and just, I'm sorry, I love you, I failed you. I was messaging friends and it wasn't straight goodbyes, but it was a lot of thank you for being
Mm-hmm.
a great friend, thank you
Yeah.
for having been there. And so some red flags went off between friends.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, at one point that night, my sister called me, and I'm not sure why I answered the phone, but I did. Um, and I told her I was done. I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this anymore. I'm done.
Yeah.
And she said, what are you trying to say? I said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. I don't want to exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time while I was on the phone, she had her husband call a welfare check on me. Um, I don't remember a lot of that. Some of it I know because talking to her about it,
Mm-hmm.
some of it pieces I can remember going through messages that I had with friends and them telling me. But pretty much that entire day is just gone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's pieces of remembering the EMTs coming into my apartment. My sister had made me unlock the door to let them in.
Mm-hmm.
Then coming in, I don't remember being in the ambulance at all, but I remember being wheeled into the emergency room, coming in and out of consciousness, um, until finally, many hours later, everything's coming out of my system because it was so far after the fact that I had taken them. There was nothing they couldn't pump my stomach.
Yeah.
It was, they kind of have to just work themselves out naturally. They were pumping me with fluids and everything, but it was a lot just to know. Part of me was mad at my sister
Mm-hmm.
for stopping me.
Right.
I felt I would have been better off
Yeah.
gone. Um, and then especially, once I came to and everything is still trying to work itself out of my system, my motor functions were limited. I was very unstable. And I was like, am I going to be like this the rest of my life? Is this what it's going to be? I have to have someone help me eat. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I told her, I was like, you should have just let me be.
Yeah.
I'm grateful now, obviously, that I'm here,
Yeah.
that she called, and that I answered.
Yeah.
Had I not answered the phone, I don't know what would have happened.
It's terrifying to think about things like that, isn't it? Like
It is.
just one simple judgment call you made saved your life, basically.
Yeah.
The decision, oh, there's a call coming through. I guess I'll answer.
Yeah.
That's such an intense experience, though. So, did they take you after you were in the ER? Did you say that they took you up to an actual psych ward after that?
Well, it was an outpatient, like, county facility.
Okay.
And it was voluntary. I
Yeah.
say that with quotations.
Air quotes there.
Um, they came to talk to my sister and I at the hospital. Um,
Who came?
the a caseworker from the facility.
Okay.
And they're like, these are your options. You can go. We recommend you go. And they present it like it's voluntary.
Hmm.
And
But
I
then
tell
you
my
signed
sister,
something, right?
right, right. And I
Yeah.
tell my sister because I know I'm not okay. Like I knew I wasn't okay. I tried in I didn't know how to ask for help way to say I wasn't okay. And so I know I need help. I want to get the help.
Mhm.
So I'm like, yes, I want to go to your facility.
Yes.
Caveat, you have to play by their rules.
Which are
And
bullshit.
right. And so like once I get to the facility and we're doing intake, you sign a paper whether you're there involuntarily or voluntarily. And I ask the caseworker that's there, I was like, well,
What am I
what's the
signing?
difference? Right. Like, what's the difference? And he's like, well, voluntary is just saying that you came on your own accord. Involuntary is that you didn't. And I was like, but I can leave, right? He's like, well, no. And I was like, well, then that's not really voluntary, is it?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I mean, but you're coming here voluntarily. I'm like, but I'm not staying voluntarily. So that's
Hmm.
the difference.
Yeah.
So it was, fine. I need to be here. Just I'm hoping it's the stability that they're telling me it's going to be, the get stable on your meds and you can go,
Hmm.
because you hear stories of people going in voluntarily, but it takes them a long time to get out.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you want to be honest and you want to get the help that you need, but at the same time you're scared that you're going to be kept there.
Yeah, it requires you to be extremely judicious with exactly what you're telling people, because effectively in that situation, when you're brought to a hospital like that, you're not just in a medical crisis, you're also in a legal situation.
Right.
And it's very, very confusing to navigate, let alone after just going through an experience where you almost lost your life. That is crazy to me. Well, let me ask you this though. Was the outpatient treatment helpful?
It was helpful in the sense that they got my meds stabilized.
Right.
They gave me an alternative to the mood stabilizer I couldn't afford. They put me on Abilify.
Okay.
So in that sense, it was productive. However, I really kind of went in wanting, like the group therapy sessions and these kinds of things, and that didn't
Hmm.
exist. They had a
Right.
caseworker come out every day and talk to you for like 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
otherwise, we had a TV and white rooms and white beds. It was,
Yeah.
can I
Sounds
have a book
familiar.
to read?
Oh my God. Yeah. We were kind of joking earlier about like their bullshit rules that they have. I remember when I was inpatient, it was mine was a civil commitment, which basically the more and more I've come to understand about it over the years is pretty much involuntary. I was brought in by police and then had to meet with a judge and a
Yeah,
lawyer and
the
had
whole kit and caboodle.
a whole kit and caboodle, and it was the worst. It didn't help me out at all. And we were talking about just these bullshit rules that they put in place. And I'm like, what the fuck? Is this kindergarten? What,
Yeah,
bedtime is 7:30? Get the fuck out of here. I'm a grown ass man. I'm like, do you understand that like I have like a degree and like
yeah.
a job and like
It
uh,
doesn't matter there.
I'm not a fucking 2-year-old.
Yeah,
Treat me with respect, treat me as an adult, and we'll mutually find a way for me to safely get out of this bullshit. But that's not the way these
no,
systems that are in place look at it. They want to keep you there. They want to make
yeah,
money off of you. They want to take your rights away. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, so there were little round tables, where we ate. You had a napkin and your cup. You had to leave your cup on the napkin. You couldn't take it to your room. You couldn't take it to the common area. If you did, they're like, "Yep, you need to put your cup down. You need
Yeah.
like you said, a 2-year-old." We had snack time. We got little bags of cookies.
Yeah, I know.
I
It,
felt like I was back in school, but in a very non-fun way.
yeah, man. And the only I did not like any single aspect of my hospitalization experience. Thank God I was only there for like 5 days. But the only thing there, I think the only moment where I was kind of like, this is somewhat bearable was they had an art therapy room. And I just went
Oh,
in
that
and
sounds cool.
I'm not good at drawing, but I just went and scribbled. I took some crayons and just scribbled some rainbows, some pretty rainbows
Be like,
on a
see,
piece.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
made a happy picture.
Check this out. You guys are doing great. I'm already good. But yeah, man, it's awful. When I was inpatient, and I wrote about this in my book, which it sounds like you may
Yes.
have
Yeah,
you
I've
checked
read.
that out? Wow, thank you so
Uh-huh.
I can't
I
believe
loved it.
people come on. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. It amazes me that people come on the show and like have already read about my life and stuff. It's just
Yeah.
I'm very honored by
Thank you
that.
for sharing it. I mean, it's hard to share this kind of stuff. And so that's what I love about your book, about the platform and the spaces when you hold the spaces. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so honored and thank you so much for saying that. In the book, there is a scene where I talk about being in the hospital. There's a chapter about being in the hospital. And I discussed this in the book, but there was a group therapist there who literally during his group therapy session, which was like, it was like in the evening and everyone was already tired. And, everyone's already on such heavy medications that
Yeah.
they put you on when you're in the hospital and shit. And I'm just sitting there listening to this motherfucker go on and on about how no one fundamentally has rights. He came into the room and he was like, "What rights do you have?" "No, you're wrong. No one has rights. There's no
Yeah.
such thing as rights." And I was like, what is he trying to get at? How dare he walk into a room full of a marginalized population and start saying something like that? And I got really mad about it and I yelled at
Hmm.
him. I was like, "You're full of shit. This is bullshit. I'm fucking out of here." And he's like, "No, you have to stay." And I was like, "Bitch, I'm going back to my room." I was like, you send those motherfuckers over here and they can talk to me there. I'm done talking to you, you know? So
Yeah.
that was fun. That was a great moment.
Yeah.
Good look for me.
They're like, maybe you need to stay a couple extra days.
He's so agitated. It's like, of course I am. There's no stimulus here. I can't listen to music. Music is like my number one thing. I can't listen to music. I'm supposed to just sit here for the next 5 days with no stimulus and just be trapped in my head in this completely humiliating situation.
Right. And our heads aren't always the best places to be.
Oh, of course not. I was having a manic episode. The last thing I wanted to do was to like be left alone with my crazy psychotic thoughts, you know. And of course, leading up to all of this, I had been under the impression that I was being surveilled by the government. And then what happens? Next thing I know, police are at my house detaining me. It just confirms I was like, holy shit, it's really going down.
It was real the whole time.
Yeah, I was right all along. That's wild. Okay, so thank you for sharing that experience. And let me ask you, are you now back on medication?
I am. So I'm on I'm on Abilify, Wellbutrin. I'm looking at my medicine, so I'm like, which ones am I on again? Mirtazapine, propanolol. So I'm not on any. Well, the Wellbutrin is the only antidepressant I'm on now. Before I was on 2 antidepressants, a mood stabilizer, anxiety meds, and sleep meds. And my new psych told me, that's a lot of meds. I want to try to roll you off of some. And he and I had a back and forth because he tried to take off of my sleep medication. And I told him, I have insomnia. He's like, well, you're not sleeping because of the depression. I was like, no, I'm not sleeping whether I'm depressed, manic, or baseline. Like, I am an insomniac. This is diagnosed. I went through the trouble to get the diagnosis. Please, just if you want to take something off, take one of the antidepressants off. I was like, but I'm getting depressed because I'm not sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And so we finally came to an agreement on that. And so he took off one of the antidepressants, and I feel really well, stable. I've been at baseline now for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And it feels good.
That's awesome. I mean, you look like you're feeling good. I radiating positivity.
Yeah. Well, and it says a lot. So my new psychiatrist, I saw him, and then 2 weeks later we do a follow-up. And I knew I was feeling depressed again, but I guess sometimes we don't realize how bad it is until someone points it out. Because 2 weeks later, he's like, you look so much better.
Yes.
I said, God, how bad did I look?
Hey, I 1000% agree. And as a matter of fact, the first psychiatrist who I ever worked with as an adult, I saw her for like 2 months and was just completely not doing her treatment plan whatsoever. And during one of the final sessions I had with her right before she dropped me, was I had just been awake for like 2 weeks and I was completely strung out, and I thought I was looking great because, I'm like feelings of grandiosity. This is my new style. I look awesome. And I walked into her office and she was like, do you realize how disheveled you look? And I was like,
you're like, I look great.
I was like, yeah, this is like my cool torn up vintage, whatever, jacket. But no, it's, yeah, I have been there too, for sure. Also, I mean, the same thing goes for like when I go into depressive episodes, I often don't realize it until someone like points it out to me, or I'm like a week in and it's too late to like do those like basic coping strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also something I've experienced in that vein.
Well, and you had said it earlier about, you have a great circle of friends. I think that's really important because I have a few great, solid friends who understand what my depression and hypomania look like. And I never had that before. And so to have those friends, because when you're in it, you don't always see it. So they can see, be like, hey, you're spending a lot of money lately. Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling? Be like, you haven't been sleeping a lot lately. How are you feeling? And so it gives you that chance to kind of step back and assess. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I am experiencing some hypomania. Let's get a couple extra therapy sessions in. Let's call the psychiatrist.
Yeah, exactly. Like it makes such a huge difference when someone who like you trust and respect reaches out to you just to be like, hey, dude, like no judgments, but just like, are you feeling okay?
Yeah.
And that's a really incredible support system to have. Um, is there anything that you've learned about yourself because of your experiences with mental illness?
Um, I don't know if I've learned so much. I mean, it's a being able to go back and see, I, for lack of better words, I always thought I was crazy. Like I felt crazy. I'm like, do normal people feel this way? Is this how everybody goes around feeling? Does
Mhm.
everybody go around wanting to just die and not exist or, be so hyper that people get annoyed by you? Is this normal? So just really having that diagnosis and being able to see like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like there's a reason for the way that I am and there's treatment available. So I've learned to love myself, I guess,
Yeah.
and accept myself that, you know, I am okay the way that I am. Like I
Yeah.
might be a little busted, I might have some cracks, but I'm not broken. I always felt broken.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful that you've had that healing process. I love that for you.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, absolutely. And before we started recording, we were talking about another thing, which is that you were specifically interested in talking a little bit about family dynamics. We were touching on that earlier with the
Yeah.
relationship with your sister and everything. But I guess I just wanted to circle back to that before the end of the episode. So, I guess first of all, let's start here. What would you say to friends or family members of someone who's living with serious mental illness? Like, what's the first thing they should understand?
Patience. I think patience is a big thing. We can't always control what's going on in our heads. Um, so just giving us some grace and loving us through it is a big thing. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, anyways, and just having that support and really trying to understand. That's something that I have come to know that I didn't realize I needed. Like when friends ask me, "Hey, what does mania look like for you? What does depression look like for you?" I mean, that's such a huge that simple thing means so much to
Yeah.
be understanding of what I'm experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and I think I would also and this kinda goes hand in hand with what you just said, but the non-judgmental aspect of things,
Yeah.
that's really important to keep in mind too. So, you had your sister reach out to you in that moment of crisis. Are there any other kinds of support that your family has offered over the years to, help you out as you battle through this condition?
I mean, in the beginning with just the depression, not really. I mean, it was this is what it is. I'm getting medication. It wasn't talked about. And it wasn't really until when my mom got sick with cancer that I even like really started opening up to her about
Mm,
how involved some of these symptoms of the diagnosis are. I had told her, hey, I am diagnosed bipolar, and it was kind of like, okay, um, congrats,
yeah,
you
like,
know,
why are you telling me?
right, and like she never made me feel bad about it or anything.
Yeah.
But it was we didn't talk about it. And so it wasn't really until she was sick that I was like, I was kind of to the point of I didn't feel judged by her anymore. And we had gotten so close because I was taking her to some of her appointments, her radiation. I was kind of like, hey, I am struggling with self-harm right now. I had went out and got a tattoo because I was having an urge to self-harm. And she's like, but why? Why do
Mhm.
you feel that way? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can't explain to you. There's not always a trigger. There's not always a why. There's certain times that I can be like, oh, I'm depressed because this happened. Like this is affecting me. But then there's just days where I'm not okay.
Mhm.
And some days I struggle with self-harm. And that was one of those days. And I was like, but I want you to understand, that
Yeah.
this is something I'm dealing with and I'm working on it. Like this is what I'm doing in therapy. This is what I'm doing with the psychiatrist, like,
Yeah.
and so I never felt judged by her, but I never really felt she was involved with it.
Like she wasn't listening.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I have my older sister who is my best friend who has just supported me through everything. And she understands and sees it. And, she's one of those people that can be like, you're talking a little fast today.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Yeah.
So it's kind of mixed. And then I have my middle sister who, like my mom, we don't acknowledge it. We don't talk about it.
Yeah.
I try, but there's comments that are made that make me feel unwelcome and kind of bad about myself. When I had got the diagnosis for BPD, borderline personality disorder, it's something that I had looked into before I was diagnosed bipolar. It was one of those, I knew I wasn't okay. I knew it wasn't just depression.
Hmm.
What is it? Um, and I was like, there's a lot of things that fit with BPD. But my first psychiatrist said no. And I was like, okay. And my therapist said no. And I said, okay, fine. Like, I'm not, I'll accept it. And then with the new psychiatrist, I'm just talking to her and she said, has anybody ever asked you about BPD? And I was
Mm.
like, no, I've been told repeatedly that it can't be this. She's like, it sounds like you are. And so I had text my sisters, because I had started group texting them, like really letting them know what's going on with me, how my mental
Yeah.
health process is going. I mean, especially once my mom passed away, because now it's just us,
Yeah.
and we have to have each other's backs. We have to lean on each other. Uh, but that particular sister had made a comment about me self-diagnosing myself, which made me feel invalidated, and just
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, no, I mean, is it wrong that I researched things to figure
How,
out what was going on with me,
not to
like,
mention, does she not understand that once you're in a hospital,
yeah,
that's where you get diagnosed?
yeah,
Like,
and that was a hard thing too, my hospitalization, because my oldest sister, she was 4 hours away. She drove up that very next morning to come to the
wow.
hospital. Um, and I think my middle sister checked on me through my oldest sister, but she was 2 hours away. She never came to see me. And that was hard to like man, like I just had this major event and you're not here.
Hmm.
That hurt.
Yeah. Now that these crisis situations have happened, do you now have an emergency plan in place? Like, for example, with your older sister who you're really close with, have you like sat down and like talked about what you'll do if something like that ever happens again?
No, which, bringing it up is definitely something that needs to be done. You think that once it's happened, it won't happen again.
Right.
We know what caused it. Let's keep that from happening. Stay on meds, don't change meds, ask for help. We talked about that kind of stuff like with therapy, but no like real, where do we go?
Hmm.
What are we going to do? Just the preventative measures we've talked about.
Yeah. You said you're currently on medication, so I would imagine you're working with a psychiatrist. Is that correct?
Yes, I have a
Are
psychiatrist and a
and
therapist.
a therapist too?
Mhm.
It might be worth talking to your therapist and maybe coming up with some sort of contingency plan. That's something I've been meaning to do with my own therapist for a really long time.
Yeah,
Um, I've been relatively stable uh, up up until the last 6 months. I've been relatively stable for the most part, but I've had a lot of environmental stressors in my life too.
and
um
changes.
Lots of changes, lots of stressors, and my stability has been kind of up and down over the last couple of months. So one of the things that I was talking to my therapist about was like, if there ever is a situation where I end up in a hospital, like you're going to be the first person who I call, or I'm going to call my family and tell them to call you
Yeah,
immediately. So I shared my therapist's contact information with both of my parents and just told them, listen, the only reason you ever use this number is if I am like dying or hospitalized,
yeah,
and then you call her and just you all you do is tell her that, and that's all she needs to know. Another good thing that I haven't done but I should do, especially since I just recently moved to a new city, is I need to do research on psychiatric treatment hospitals that are in this area,
yeah.
so I know how to navigate them, because not all hospitals are created equal and I don't want to
No,
be in some nightmare scenario.
like lived that once. Don't want to go back.
Oh my gosh, I know. Yeah, it's like been there, done that, never again. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I don't know, maybe that's just something to think
I mean,
about.
absolutely. It's because you never know when that stressor can hit. You never know when that stressor can happen. And
Yeah, it could be anything.
yeah,
Yeah, and it could be a legitimate stressor too, such as a death in the family or like a car accident or something.
right.
So yeah, anyhow, I guess just when it comes to living with such complicated conditions like the ones that you and I live with, you just have to have like a greater degree of like self-accountability and foresight,
Yeah.
and you have to conduct yourself intelligently. It's very interesting. I think that a lot of quote unquote normal people, everyone is special and unique, but some fall on different
Yeah.
parts of the bell curve. Um, I just think a lot of neurotypical people don't ever think about that sort of thing. Like they've never been in a situation where suddenly you've accidentally signed paperwork and now you can't leave a secure facility for a week or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't understand that these are things that systemically happen to people with mental illness, and they're human rights issues.
Well,
So,
and then even when you're outside of it, when you're with your psychiatrist and therapist, how open can I be to not
right,
end up there? You
right.
know, I feel like we always have that fear of there's somewhere for us to go and be put.
Yeah. Yeah, it basically feels like being incarcerated. It feels very prison-like.
Yeah.
And you're totally right. Like oftentimes I have to be very measured with the way I speak with my psychiatrist because I don't want him to be alarmed about anything if I like misspeak.
Exactly.
As I was going through this depressive episode over the last couple of weeks, I did have an appointment with my psychiatrist, and I've worked with him for a little over a year now. And suicidal ideation isn't anything new to me, but I'd never
Yeah.
shared that with him before. But I told him because it was starting to get kind of alarming to me. I was like, listen, like, just to be transparent with you. I, I'm, I've been having like suicidal ideation. And then I immediately followed up by saying, I absolutely am not following through.
Right.
I
Like,
do not have a plan.
that's the kicker. I don't have a plan, but, and I hate that question because ideation is something that I struggle with and have, I mean, since I can eighth grade freshman year. You know, I have always had that. And so I hate that question when you see the psychiatrist. Do you have any suicidal thoughts? I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but I don't have a plan. Like, I don't want to exist,
Mhm.
but I don't want to kill myself. I just don't want to be here. I mean, take that as you will.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was having kind of like a late night freak out about something a couple of months ago. And while I'm pretty cagey with my psychiatrist, my therapist is fucking awesome. I've worked with her for about 4 years now. She's so good. I really,
Yeah,
really like her. And it's because I can trust her and we have like a good like rapport with each other.
right.
And when I was having this, like, it was just this really weird freak out situation where I saw something in the news that just completely triggered me. It was like some violent crime shit. And it just had me, I don't know what it was. It's like kind of like what you were talking about earlier, where there had just been all this background stress. And finally, one more thing happened where I was just like, all right,
Done.
I
I'm
was like,
out.
done. Fuck it. Like, this is like, I cannot reconcile living in this universe right
Right.
now.
Yeah. No, it's hard right now.
It's really hard. Yeah. We've got the end of days, we've got war in Ukraine, the plague. It's just
Everything. You
outrageous.
name it, we've got it.
Yeah, exactly. But my therapist is super cool, and I called her at like 1 a.m, and I just left her a voicemail and was like, hey, and sounding as calm as I possibly could. I was just like, oh, good evening. I was just wondering if you could possibly give me a call back immediately.
Like super calm, like I'm not
Like,
okay, but I'm
yeah,
gonna
and
sound
then
like everything's fine.
and then I sent her a follow-up email and was like, good evening. Could you please call me for a confidential doctor-client conversation? And, but like to my surprise, she actually called me back like 10 minutes later. And
Oh,
she
that's
was
awesome.
like, yeah, she's so good. Like most therapists would not do that.
Yeah,
And
no.
she called me and she was just like, hey, like, is everything okay? And I was like, not really. And she was like, okay, well, like, just like kind of take it down. And
Take a step back.
I just talked to her for like 5 minutes and she was able to kind of get me just to chill the fuck out. And I was like,
Right.
oh, I was like, okay, cool. Like, I got it. Like, we're good. But yeah, I'm so glad that I have resources like that available right now because
Yeah.
historically I haven't. And that therapist, that phone call that I made late at night, I wouldn't have done that with any other therapist who I've ever worked with because
Yeah.
it would cause undue alarm. Um, and that's how you end up getting like wellness checks called on you and shit. So,
Yeah. It's good to have that. I've had my therapist for 3.5, 4 years now also. Um, and he's great. He's one of those people that can tell by my demeanor, by my speech patterns, you
mhm.
know, where I'm at on my baseline, whether I'm baseline depressive, hypomanic, and it's great to be able to have that support and to have somebody be like, can you get me in an emergency session? Like, I'm not okay
Yeah,
this week,
yeah,
and that was really hard, like earlier this year with my hospitalization when I got out, he was like, why didn't you call me?
I know.
And I was like, I thought about calling him, my sister, my best friend, my cousin. I was like, but after every scenario in my head, I still couldn't see a path for me. Like I couldn't see anything anymore. And he was like, thank you for saying that. He's like, I've wondered. He's like, he had a friend that passed from suicide. He's like, I always wondered why he didn't call me. He's like,
Mhm.
I've never had the opportunity to ask somebody. He said, so thank you.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. We've covered a whole lot of ground and we're coming right up on the 1 hour mark. I had a couple of quick questions for you if you still have a few
Yeah,
minutes.
absolutely.
Okay, cool. Well, one of the questions I had to switch over to a more positive note is what do you do to relax? Like, what self-care exercises or strategies are you using right now?
Yes. So I do a lot of online gaming. Um,
Cool.
so that helps. Music helps. I love music, anything and everything. Um, and my cat and my kids. I mean, they bring me down to earth and remind me, that it might be a bad day, but it could be worse,
Yeah.
so that and just, simple things, just simple necessities, bathing, taking care of myself, doing my nails, just those kind of things. So just be like calm.
Yeah. Yeah, taking care of yourself and just doing things that are relaxing and are for
Yeah.
you to take a moment and just like chill. What kind of music have you been listening to lately? Do you have like any top artists who you've been
Um,
into?
right now I've been in my anime playlist a lot.
Okay, never mind.
Honestly.
What's
Uh,
the anime? No, I'm joking. What's the anime playlist?
I have a mix of My Hero Academia, Black Clover, Demon Slayer. I mean, you name it, it's there. I just love music that pumps me up, that makes me feel happy.
Uh-huh.
And then at night I go to sleep to Rammstein's piano playlist. They did a
Oh
piano
yeah.
album.
Yeah.
So I go to sleep to that or to Apocalyptica, which is a Swedish cello rock band.
Yeah. Yeah, they're cool. They do like covers of Metallica songs and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, I love music. Music's huge to me. I'm a musician and I constantly am listening to music if I'm at work or if I'm just chilling. It's like I got to have some sort of stimulation in the background
Yeah.
just to like keep things going. I was going to talk to you about Rammstein. I've been listening to a lot of Rammstein lately.
Yeah.
Like
Which
a
album?
lot.
Just all of them?
Their first one, Rise Rise, which is my all-time favorite by them. And I also really like Rosen Road.
Okay. I
Yeah.
I really liked last year's album, Rammstein. There was their
Yeah,
song.
the one with the matchstick on it.
Yes,
Yeah, that was cool.
I loved that album. I That's probably my favorite one. Their first one, I have some great songs that I love from there, but last year's one was really good.
Yeah, what's the first one is called like Sunsucht or something. It has like a weird German name that I
Yeah, I
can't
know it's.
pronounce.
I can see the cover.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's got a freaky
Yeah.
cover. Oh man, yeah, nah, but yeah, like Du Haas, like anything that has like a really nice, like intense kind of like
Right.
pounding beat. I fucking love that.
Well, my favorite song is from the last album is Puppet. Puppet.
Okay.
Oh, I love that song.
I
That
don't
song's a
know
good one.
I don't know that one off the top of my head, unfortunately, but I think if I'm remembering correctly, is that the one that has Auslander on it?
Yes.
I
Yeah,
really
that's that
like
one. Yeah.
Auslander.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good catchy one. I used to.
Auslander.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, because I took 2 years of German in high school.
Yeah.
So I love listening to it and like seeing what I can translate and what I remember
Mhm.
before I look to see what the lyrics are in English. And so like my kids, they'll be in the car and I'm jamming out to German music. And so, they can pick up some of the words now and sing it. And I
That's
just love
cool.
that. Yeah.
How old are they?
They're 11 and 13
Oh,
boys.
cool. So they're that's like a good age to start getting into Rammstein.
Yeah.
Do you listen to any other metal?
Um, I listen to a lot. I used to love 3 Days Grace.
Okay.
So not metal. Not yeah, no. I listened to your stuff.
Really?
Yeah, you put a new one out not too long ago, I think. Was it? Because I just
Um,
saw it recently on my Spotify.
I have two projects. The last project I was working on is called Last Known Images, and I released an LP about a year and a half ago. And then I have some solo work that I've been doing. I released a solo EP at the beginning of this year. And then there was a single that I released like 2 months ago called Burning Summer,
Yes.
which
I
is
think that might be the one that I saw.
cool. Yeah, people seem to be liking that one, which is really cool. It's kind of surprised me because it's a lot different than the type of music I would normally write. But music is a huge outlet for me, writing music as well as listening to music. Well, thank you so much for supporting my work. You've read my book, you've been listening to my music.
Yeah.
And now you're on my podcast.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome back anytime. I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
And before we close out, I always just like to pass it back over to the guest for a second and ask if you have anything else you'd like to add or any other questions or just comments or anything.
Stay strong. Keep your head up for anybody that's going through anything with mental illness. It's not easy. You're not alone. I think that's a big thing. I love being reminded, just little things here and there that other people feel this way, and I'm not the only one. I'm not a broken human.
Yeah.
I think that's a big message that a lot of people can hear is you're not broken and you're not alone.
Yeah. You're never alone, man. It's so isolating though sometimes, but we have things now like social media, like the communities that we created through Twitter Spaces and
Yeah.
stuff, where even if you don't have someone in your personal real life who you can, reach out to, you still have peers online who you can talk to. And that's really, really important. When I was first diagnosed and when I was going through my really intense manic episode, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anyone who I could talk to. I had alienated everyone around me. And the only person I could talk to was my psychiatrist, who didn't want to talk to me. She just wanted to
Yeah.
prescribe medication.
And you weren't trying to take them.
And I wasn't taking it. So yeah, it was a recipe for disaster. But these days, I'm very, very blessed to have a supportive and caring friend group of, people who I've met throughout my life. Some of them I've known for over 20 years now. We've been like lifelong friends, and it's just amazing to have that kind of relationship with people. And then I have a lot of new friends who like Twitter friends, people
Yeah.
through the Twitterverse who I've become close with. And I just had an extended conversation last night with a guy who lives in the UK. And how else would I ever have met him?
Exactly.
If it weren't for Twitter Spaces. It's so weird. Elon Musk is going to fuck it all up. But,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm thankful for, I have a great Discord group from my gaming, and the very first person I ever met other than myself that was bipolar was from that group. And I was like, hey, we're friends now.
Yeah.
And so we can relate to each other in that way. So that was the first ever relatable person that I had until I got on Twitter. And now there's just so many people that I've connected with through Twitter, through the Twitter Spaces that you host. And it's just an awesome thing to be able to come together with other people of like minds.
Absolutely. Well, do you have any projects you're working on or any social media you'd like to plug or
I just have
anything?
my Twitter, my Orphan Moon Twitter.
Okay.
I'm writing, but nothing is published or on blogs or anything like that. Just trying to get back into writing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and open about everything that's been going on. I really appreciate it, and I really do wish you all the best, and I wish you health and happiness.
Thanks, Hunter. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Suicide is a really hardcore topic, to say the least, but it's something that significantly impacts our society. There are over 130 suicides each day in the United States. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, in 2020, over 45,000 Americans died by suicide. In that same year, 1.2 million suicides were attempted. Remember that resources are available to you if you are experiencing suicidal ideation or perhaps have a plan in place to take your own life. For example, there's the new 988 National Suicide and Mental Health Hotline, where you can call or text and speak to someone. I did research on it, and the 988 number does not automatically dispatch crisis intervention teams to your location or mean that you inherently will be hospitalized. I know that I personally had that concern about the 988 number until I did further research on their website. According to them, less than 2% of their calls are referred to police and or EMS. If you just need someone to talk to for a few minutes, it might be a good option, although I have not personally used it at this time. As a matter of fact, if anyone out there listening has ever used the 988 number, be sure to connect with me because I'd like to hear your experience with it. The 988 number is just one example of a resource available that can help with suicide prevention. In my own experience, I've found peer support groups to be very helpful as well. Twitter Spaces, Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, also known as DBSA, Smart Recovery, and National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI, are all examples of resources where I've found peer support for all sorts of things related to bipolar and substance abuse issues. Regarding my own life that was touched on during this installment, my holiday crisis from late November was no joke and really changed my perspective on certain things. It continues to blow my mind how throughout these installments of Bipolar Recorder that I did in early November of this year, I keep bringing up things like being on new medications, experiencing mood cycles, experiencing severe insomnia, and so on. You'll continue to hear ominous foreshadowing statements in the next installment as well. If you'd like to hear about the actual crisis situation itself, check out episode 29, Hunter's Holiday Crisis and Whack Drug Relapse. My name is Hunter Keegan. Today's guest was Brittany. Brittany can be found on Twitter at orphanmoon21. Also be sure to check the episode notes for more info. I'm on Twitter at HHKeegan. Bipolar Recorder is on Twitter at Bipolar Recorder. Feel free to reach out and connect. Remember to tell your friends about this show and rate and review if you've been enjoying it. Thanks again for listening and have a great, safe day, evening, or night wherever you are.
Bipolar Recorder is a listener-supported show. To help keep the show running, consider checking out our Patreon page or visiting bipolarrecorder.com.
Unless otherwise stated, the hosts and guests on Bipolar Recorder are not licensed mental health professionals. Bipolar Recorder is not a substitute for therapy or professional medical intervention. If you are having a mental health crisis, please contact your local emergency services.